can you still find a ploughman's lunch in London at a pub? Partly what prompted this is a comment, Thomas, I think it is, I'll put that down below, that he hadn't seen a ploughman's lunch at a pub for a long time. And now I think about it, neither have I. I think it's probably more of a country pub thing, but I'm sure there was a time when it was a little bit more common at London pubs. So I've done a bit of research, had a bit of a look around, and I think I might have found a candidate at the Queen's Larder behind me. I think that was a successful endeavour. The Queen's Larder here is very much an independent pub. Unfortunately, so much of the pub food in London is basically dictated by large pub chains, and the menus all look a bit similar. Probably could pick nits with this, of course. The range of cheeses there, I would say, is a little bit eclectic. I really just wanted a big rustic looking lump of farmhouse cheddar, and it seems like we've got something like, is that possibly goat's cheese there? And a sort of a brie or camembert-like cheese. Something like Branston pickle in the middle there. The other pickle, more like a gherkin, feel like a big pickled onion would be more traditional there, but fine. And the bread, I don't know if you can see that, a little bit more sort of ciabatta style. I would really have rather have had some very traditional English bread rather than the ciabatta. I thought that was out of place in that setting. They also have Timothy Taylor's Landlord on tap here, and there is a badge on the pump suggesting that they're particularly well regarded by Timothy Taylor's, the brewer, for the quality of their beer, and I'd say that's in pretty good shape. It was a bit difficult to film at the Queen's Larder. I have covered that pub before in a video on, I think it was Bloomsbury pubs, wasn't it? So I've talked about the history and so on. I think it's a great little boozer, a nice sort of independent feel to it. Beer usually good as well. I'm going to try and find a slightly quieter pub where I can sit outside and won't be disturbing the other customers to talk a little bit more about the history, or lack thereof, depending on your position on the subject, of the ploughman's lunch. Cheers from the old Nick. I have no idea whether they serve a ploughman's lunch here or not, but I just remember this is a relatively quiet pub not too far away from the Queen's Larder. I have covered this pub before. It was a video called More Holborn Pubs. Lovely bit of Swedish coastal red granite there. I'm having a pint of Thirsty Ferret. This is a Hall and Woodhouse pub. It's an oft quoted fact that the ploughman's lunch is a complete fabrication of the 1960s, a creation of the Milk Marketing Board. I think the reality is somewhat more nuanced than that. It is impossible to believe that something as simple as fundamentally a hunk of bread, a hunk of cheese, and possibly some sort of pickled onion or pickles of some description did not predate the 1960s. That modern marketing drive did not start with the Milk Marketing Board in the 1960s. The Cheese Bureau, which sounds wonderfully clandestine, had started efforts of a similar vein about a decade earlier. So back in the 1950s, there was already an effort to promote some sort of cheese-based luncheon format, as though the humble cheese sandwich were not enough. According to Wikipedia, the font of all knowledge, the earliest written reference to a ploughman's lunch is a poem of 1394 or thereabouts called Pierce the Ploughman's Creed. It says that mentions the traditional ploughman's meal of bread, cheese and beer. I'm not convinced by this. I went and actually read Pierce the Ploughman's Creed, 800 or so lines of Middle English. As an aside, there is a curious reference back to last week's video with talk of ditch cleansing. What is it with that period of history and cleansing of ditches? But anyway, that's not really relevant. I think the part that probably is being referred to here, and I've scoured the whole thing for food and drink references, is this passage here. And mena mong cornbread to her meter fongen, and verters fleshless rota and water to drinken. So there is a little translation in this, I think, late 19th century version. It says they ought to dig and delve and eat common bread and vegetables without meat. Another translation I found for that passage there said that was they should delve and dig and fertilize the earth and have common cornbread for their food, vegetables prepared without meat and water to drink. There is a footnote in that translation that cornbread was actually at that time a generic term for any grain-based bread. So what do we have? It seems to suggest that the ploughmen of that era were eating essentially a vegetarian diet. It doesn't mention cheese. For me, that's really the critical thing here for defining what we now think of as a ploughman's lunch. And there is certainly no mention of beer or ale there. Quite explicitly, you could still read that, even though it's in Middle English, water to drinkin'. I did my usual search of the newspaper archives, and the earliest mention I could find of a ploughman's lunch in connection with bread and cheese is from 1889, although intriguingly it seems to be also referring to jacket potatoes. So quite why you need bread if you already have a jacket potato, I'm not sure, but that connection between bread and cheese and the ploughman having it for lunch clearly goes far back before the 1950s. Useful shortcut here to the next pub on this impromptu pub crawl while I talk about ploughman's lunches through Gray's Inn, only open in the daytime Monday to Friday. Still never really properly covered the Olde Mitre on this channel. I did actually visit there on a very old video, the original Belgravia pubs video. I know this is nowhere near Belgravia Toto, just popped in here on the way back, so it got a very brief mention then. For some time I had been planning to do a much more ambitious video about the history of the Olde Mitre that I just never seemed to quite manage to finish. Anyway, I'm going to pop in there now to talk a bit more about ploughman's lunches. Cheers from the Olde Mitre. I seem to have timed this perfectly and have managed to snag the snug. The textbook of ploughman's lunches for me has to be the Harrow Inn at Steep near Petersfield. Locally baked bread, very generous hunk of cheese, simple basic salad and some homemade, I think, chutney, and just everything there is done the way it should be, in my opinion. I think that may be it for this funny video. I have answered the question, can you get a ploughman's lunch in London still? Maybe it wasn't the world's best ploughman's lunch, but it was basically fitting the core tenets of what a ploughman's lunch should consist of on some level. So thanks very much for watching. See you on the next one. Bye bye.